Hello and welcome to Houston PetSet's Conversations with the Candidates. You know, November 3rd is right around the corner, and many of us are going to be voting, but do we really know the candidates? Have we put faces with names, and have we really come to understand what their interests are in issues that are important to us? Issues like animal welfare. Well, today we have with us Penny Morales-Shaw and Louis Lorota, who are running for Texas House of Representatives District 148. And they're going to share with us what they think about animal welfare and what we can do about that in the city. I'm MaryJane Mudd. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Houston, and I am honored to be here. So before we start, I want you to know that we did flip a coin, and Louis came up first as the winner. And so he will be the first to tell you a little bit about himself, and then we'll switch to Penny.
Okay, thank you, MJ. Thanks for having me and Penny both on this program. Animal welfare rights is something that I deeply care about. I think after Hurricane Harvey, most Houstonians became sensitive to the real issues that are plaguing our community. A little bit about myself. I'm a native Houstonian. My father was a Colombian. He came to the US in the 1970s as an offshore oil rig worker. And my mother came from Honduras. Their entire family fled despotic regime down there. So both my families are immigrants and came to the United States to look for a better life, to make a contribution, and to have a better future for us. I served in the United States military and the Navy, and when I came back after serving 6 years and doing some work across the country, I noticed that this district really hadn't improved in a lot of ways. So that's when I became sensitized to the idea that maybe we can make an impact here, and a state rep race is a good way to start. Now, on the issues and why I became so passionate, I have several animals here. I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. We rescue animals often. We help foster out cats. So, I mean, I think all animal life is important. I think it says a lot about our society, the way we treat animals. And, you know, depending on, you know, what your faith might be, you know, I believe that, you know, God looks at us the way that we treat other animals. And that's a reflection of, you know, who we are. So we need to do better. Oftentimes, government doesn't provide the best solution, but we can establish a framework for which we can start making the improvements that we need in this area, which there are many. Not sure how much time I have left. I don't see a chat.
And that's good. That's good, because we're going to ask you a lot of questions, so you'll be able to share more. And now I'd like to turn it over to Penny, who is going to be giving us some information about herself as well.
Thank you, MJ. And I'm just here saying hello to all the viewers. I'm Penny Morales-Shaw, the Democratic nominee for Texas House 148. I grew up here in Houston. I'm a 20-year lawyer. Human rights and civil rights is a big part of my practice. I'm the daughter of Air Force vet, and my mother was she's retired now, was a healthcare worker. Morales is my mother's name, so Mexican-American family, and my dad is Irish, Shaw. And I am also a mother of 4 young adults now. And part of raising them was teaching them the importance of animal life. In fact, I've been a vegetarian since I was about 17, and they are lifelong vegetarians. And that's a different angle of being compassionate to animals, but equally important. And we're also the proud parents of a rescue dog, and it's probably our 3rd or 4th one that we've had the pleasure of sharing a home with. In my work, in my human rights and civil rights work, a lot of that was concentrated in Washington, D.C. for about 6 years of my 20-year practice. And I've also worked in local government here in Harris County as Deputy Chief of Policy and Legislative Affairs. And when I left that office to run for this position, I met and got very close to Jessica Farrar, who I think a lot of the viewers here will know. She's was a very compassionate leader for 25 years and a big advocate of animal rights and justices. So I look forward to following in her footsteps.
So Penny, actually, because Louis got the first crack at it, I'm going to give you the first question here, so you can see more, and then we'll go to Louis with the same question. Please define the area's homeless animal issue as you understand it. So your area's homeless animal issue.
I think our issue, a big issue here when you say my area, I think you're talking about District 148 and not the whole county, correct? Okay. In our area, the issue is one that we have a lot of strays, the one District 148 ranges all the way from the north side, goes through the upper part of Houston, and then comes over to 290. So it's a big range and a very diverse geographic area. So in some parts of the district, we have a lot of strays. We have issues with loose animals also, maybe not strays, but that are often loose a lot and not necessarily neutered or spayed. So there's, of course, breeding, and then there's a multiplication of animals that could later lead to homelessness of animals. Our laws have improved as far as it relates to how people treat animals and how they care for them. I think there's been a broad expansion of free services for neutering and spaying, which really helps also. But I don't think that enough people engage in that. And I think as a leader, I think we can use our position to encourage people to use that more and educate the public more about any problems that we have with homeless animals. And of course, from homelessness, we also have a lot of animal cruelty and death unnecessarily, or we have pickup, and we don't want any of these animals to end up in kill shelters either.
Right. Thank you. And so, Louis, how do you look at this? Please define the area's homeless animal issue as you understand it.
Sure. I think that largely our problem stems from a cultural problem, like many of the problems that we're facing. So as Penny described, our district is wide and it's diverse. And I think we see the largest amount of homeless populations in the communities affected, like in the Near side, the North Line area, Spring Branch. That's really where you're going to see most homeless, abandoned, unneutered, untethered animals drifting around. I do think that there's actually quite a bit of engagement here in the Houston area. There's several groups here, several nonprofits that work very closely with my campaign that I donate to, that have done a good job. But obviously the load is very heavy on them because we have kill shelters here still in Harris County. And it's something that we're very passionate about, that we want to see change, but it takes a village to do this. So largely the Babe reports, yes, we do need to do something about animals that are loose. I think that we have to engage at the local level and let people know, because I know that when I go to Mexico, when I go to Colombia, when I go to Honduras, this is a very Latino cultural thing. You know, we let our dogs off the leash, we want them to be free, but it's not really appropriate here, you know, because one, it's not healthy for the animals, it's not safe for the animals. And, you know, animals are meant to provide us companionship and protection. So we need to do the same by them. Having these low-cost animal, Tidwell low-cost animal hospitals where I take my pets, they do a fantastic job, charge very low. They've helped me save countless dogs. So the community does a very good job. Now we as legislators need to support that community. We need to strengthen some of these laws, because as it stands, the burden is too great for law enforcement and for alone to do the job.
So, okay, so you know, you mentioned earlier about organizations, and Louis, you're going to be the next in line so that we go back and forth with these questions. How would your office support the organizations that are working in the animal welfare arena?
Sure. I think this is where you can really demonstrate leadership outside of just being the state legislature, because let's be honest, for us to go to Austin and lobby, it's not going to affect people the same. I mean, rural communities feel very differently about these issues as opposed to urban communities. So what we need to do is be direct advocates for the cause here in Houston. And I think that starts with leadership on the ground, talking to the business community, talking to the people that have an affinity that are doing this work already. We can raise the money, we can support these organizations, but it takes people on the ground. And you don't have to be a state legislature to do it. It's great to have that. But first and foremost, we know the people in this community that care about the issues. We know the community is affected by it. We know that there's lots of veterinary organizations that do a lot of donating their time, their resources. Let's get them involved in this process, because I'm sure that we can come up with a solution, because I fear that if we get funding from Austin, it's just as easy to take that funding away, and that leaves us in a worse position than we were off in the beginning. So I hate to see something like that happen.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, so Louis, how would your office advocate for the animal welfare community, including the shelters run by municipalities?
Okay, MJ, I just wanted to touch on something that was said. As legislators, what we could actually do is we need to support SB 295 type legislation so that the Sunset Commission doesn't end the licensed breeder program, because those costs that are ultimately borne by the nonprofits actually hurt nonprofits the most. So as legislators, we need to help to reinforce that, because what I've been reading is that we're spending about up to $200 to $600 per animal anytime we have to go in and shut down a puppy mill. And that just doesn't help, because it represents a huge cost to the community. Here in Houston, in January 2011, we had 240 animals that were rescued, and that cost taxpayers in the local community $80,000. That ultimately fell on the nonprofit organizations. So the legislation can help. So supporting our nonprofit organizations is a matter of enforcing, SB 95, getting the licensed breeder program to remain intact and not expire at the Sunset Commission. But also we need accountability, because I think what we see is animal cruelty is still a big issue. The FBI has actually started tracking this data, thanks to large part to Animal Welfare Institute. It only took them 14 years. But a lot of this data still only represents 30% of the population. And what that means is that if somebody commits some kind of atrocity to an animal in Webster, they can go to Pasadena and do the same thing over and over again. So the FBI is trying to compile that information, but it's still early. So as state legislatures, we should be building this database here locally to build that out, so that people don't go, from breeder to breeder, taking animals and abusing them. That would help, relieve the load for some of the local nonprofits that are engaged in rehabilitating and bringing these animals back into homes.
Thank you. So Penny, for you, how would your office advocate for the animal welfare community, including the shelters run by?
I think the most empowering thing that a legislator can do is to foster and provide funding to reputable entities. So if we're talking specifically about municipalities now, then don't give them mandates that are, number one, unfunded. If you're going to support a municipality and local ordinances, then do it with the funding to back it up. I think that's important. So if I had to narrow it down, I would say that I would support them in, if they were making or pushing ordinances or initiatives for no-kill shelters, or anything to do with rendering plants, which I think are horrific, or to support positive things, like instead of criminalizing activity, because every community is different, and I think it requires education and facilitating people. So instead of criminalizing things, I think in some instances you do have to, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that. But I also think incentivizing is very important. And I think as a legislator, we can do that in conjunction with local municipalities and local jurisdictions.
Okay, Penny, how would your office support the organizations that are working in the animal welfare arena?
MJ, I think that the best way that any level of governing body can help local nonprofits that are doing the on-the-ground work, especially with animal shelters, transporting, rescuing, adopting, facilitating adoptions, is funding, because we know that funding will empower these nonprofits to do their work, and they're of the on-the-ground boots. They know what's needed in every community. And funding really empowers them to do their job better. And of course, supporting legislation that helps them to do their job. Again, they're the boots on the ground. They know what's needed. They bring those issues to the state legislators and say, this has a loophole, or we need this in order to be able to do our job better, and help rescues, adoptions, whatever the community needs to protect the animals.
Louis, do you have a specific platform item on animal welfare? And if yes, what is it? And if no, why not?
Yes, so probably just what I said, supporting ending the puppy mills. So that was SB 295. And then the holy grail, I think, of animal welfare rights is creating a national database system so that people cannot be repeat offenders of animals. And that just, it boggles the mind. So we have this already to protect children. So you can't, commit an atrocity against a child and then go to another city and do the same thing. We have that with animals. The problem that's going to lie is that there are different cultural perceptions of, what animals are and what they aren't. I respect all life. They have to acknowledge that there's non-farm animals and that there are farm animals. So that people in rural districts have an adversity to these types of legislative issues, especially when we talk about funding, because now we're pulling money from areas that don't even agree with what we're talking about. So I think we're going to run across some issues in Austin. So I prefer to localize these ideas and localize the funding, do the best we can. Honestly, a lot of the best ideas that are funded start with GoFundMe. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but when people in the community are deeply vested and are committed, things happen. When we kind of delegate this responsibility to Austin people outside of our community, anything can happen. And like I said, we can get the funding, let's say next year, but what if they take the funding away? I mean, it hurts more to do it that way. I think we need to do it the right way and start here in the community. The city of Houston is a vastly wealthy city. We have plenty of resources. We have plenty of willpower. We just need leadership here. And I think that's what's been lacking in the last 25 years.
Thank you, Louis. Penny, what about you? Do you have a specific platform item on animal welfare? If so, what is it? And if not, why not?
In general, what comes before me when it has to do with animal welfare is a heartstring for me. But specifically, we have to deal with animal abuse. We know that it's still rampant, and we know there's horrific cases of it. So animal abuse, and a very kind of a niche area, is there was studies done that linked animal abuse directly with domestic violence. They were often, one was found to be in companion with the other. So I think that tagging, they're using the power of legislation to tag domestic violence cases, statutes, regulations to checking on the welfare of animals in those situations, I think is a way to eliminate and eradicate and reduce animal abuse. The other one is, a big one, is tethering. The inhumane treatment of animals, whether it's all day or whether it's without food and water or out in the elements. So I think that's something that we need to continue to tackle. And then, of course, the last thing is fun. And again, I wanted to just say, I believe that we need to incentivize instead of criminalizing as much as we can when it comes to something like tethering, that it's really coming from a cultural background. So funding education and programs that facilitate changing that. And then, of course, my last thing is just funding in general. Like I said, I believe funding is very empowering when we put out mandates, or we want to fortify laws that already exist, or regulations, or educational programs to the community to protect animals. Funding is very important.
So Penny, I'm going to go ahead and give you the next question. And you've touched on some of these things, but this gives you an opportunity to expand. If you were to win your race, can you comment to meeting with Houston PetSet during the upcoming legislative session?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, as I said before, Jessica Farrar was a huge animal rights advocate. She's my mentor, and I believe that I have to hear from all of the groups to know what the most pressing issues are and what actions we need to take.
Thank you. And Louis, what about you? If you win your race, would you commit to meeting with Houston PetSet and talking about animal welfare?
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to. And I think it's encouraging to note that Republicans can get behind issues like this, especially in the light that some of the best efforts and some of the most successful initiatives have been ideas that have been fueled by nonprofits, by free market thinkers. And I think that's what's lacking here, because we kind of suffered from a massive amount of groupthink. The mayor, a lot of people in city council, here people in the state rep kind of position. This has been a problem for a long time now. It's nothing new. And I ask people, if they want to see changes, you have to vote differently. It's not okay for us to just keep doing the same time and time again and expecting different results. So I hope that we'll be given the opportunity to prove to people that there are changes that can be made within a couple of years and not within 25 years.
Thank you. And Penny and Louis, I would just like to thank you for your time and sharing why animal welfare is important to you. It's certainly important to us, and absolutely it's important to Houston PetSet. So thank you again for allowing us to get to know you better in conversations with the candidates.